Yesterday, someone felt a sudden, inexplicable emptiness that came out of nowhere like a silent wave passing through the soul, without warning. It wasn't ordinary sadness. It wasn't loneliness in the traditional sense we know so well. It was something completely different and far deeper than any ordinary emotion. It was as if an essential part of oneself had suddenly gone missing, as if the entire universe had held its breath for an infinite, suspended moment. If you are here now, in this very instant, you have probably recognized this sensation in your own words, in that emptiness you can't explain through rational logic, but feel with absolute certainty deep in your chest. Carl Jung, through decades of deep research into the human psyche and its hidden mechanisms, discovered something revolutionary about these moments of apparently inexplicable emptiness that strike us all of a sudden. They are not random, as we might think. They are not symptoms of depression or emotional lack, as we might superficially believe. They are precise signals that the unconscious sends when something profoundly significant is about to happen in our life, something that will forever change the way we exist in the world and perceive ourselves. This video does not exist to feed superficial romantic fantasies or to sell consoling illusions that last as long as a click. It exists to show you the precise psychological mechanism that activates when the soul recognizes that it is about to meet its counterpart, long before the rational mind can even imagine what is really happening in the depths of being. If you have ever felt that sudden emptiness followed by an encounter that changed everything forever, if you have experienced that feeling of incompleteness that suddenly turned into a deep and inexplicable recognition, if you have felt that mysterious familiarity with someone you had never seen before in your entire existence, then you are about to understand something fundamental about the nature of a destiny shared between two souls that seek each other across time. Jung repeatedly warned that the unconscious does not know linear time, the way we know it in ordinary daily life, when two psyches are destined to meet according to an invisible higher order. They begin to communicate long before the physical bodies find themselves in the same room, through vivid dreams, sudden intuitions, inexplicable physical sensations, and above all, through that particular emptiness that prepares the inner space for the arrival of something completely new. This is not just any content that you will find everywhere on the internet, repeated in 1,000 different forms. It is the scientific explanation of what many call a premonition or inexplicable intuition, but which is in reality something far more complex, profound, and transformative than we can imagine with the ordinary mind we use every day. If you leave before the end of this journey together, you will miss the most important part of the message, the part that explains why some people enter your life preceded by that particular emptiness and change everything forever in ways you could never have predicted, while other people, even though they are wonderful and compatible in every rational respect, arrive without the unconscious announcing them and remain only fond memories that fade over time, leaving little trace. The fundamental difference does not lie in the superficial compatibility we can measure, in immediate physical attraction, or in shared common interests we gradually discover. It lies in something that happens in the depths of being, in that empty space the soul consciously creates to make room for what must arrive according to a greater design. If something in this already resonates deeply within you, like an ancient truth you once knew but had forgotten in the noise of daily life, subscribe to the channel and write emptiness in the comments below, so that the YouTube algorithm understands that this reflection deserves to reach those who truly need it at this precise moment of their personal existence. Because when you understand the Jung's law of the emptiness that precedes deep soul recognition, you don't only change the way you see romantic relationships and their mechanisms. You change the way you recognize the signals. The unconscious constantly sends you to guide you toward what is truly destined for you, according to a higher order. Listen with the utmost attention, because here, a very widespread fantasy about emotional emptiness is broken. One we all believe we know well, but have in reality never truly understood in its deepest and most transformative function. It is not always a symptom of pathological lack, chronic emotional deficiency, or a psychological problem to be solved quickly with therapy or medication. Sometimes it is the soul's conscious preparation, a sacred space that is deliberately created to welcome something new that is about to manifest in concrete physical reality. Jung called this mysterious phenomenon unconscious preparation, and he observed it repeatedly in his patients who were about to experience transformative encounters that would completely change the course of their existence. The collective unconscious, in its infinite wisdom that transcends rational understanding, deliberately creates a state of deep receptive emptiness that allows the soul to be completely present and available when what is destined arrives according to a higher plan. I want to make this concrete with a real case I personally followed in counseling to help you understand exactly what we mean when we speak of the soul's preparatory emptiness. Luca, a 42-year-old engineer, extremely rational and methodical, who did not believe in these things in the slightest, contacted me because for 3 weeks he had been feeling an inexplicable emptiness that deeply disturbed his orderly life. He was not clinically depressed. He had no obvious work or family problems, yet he constantly felt that something important was missing from his well-structured life, without being able to identify in the slightest what exactly was missing. Luca described this strange sensation as a waiting without a defined object, as if his entire being were silently listening for something that had yet to happen, but that he felt approaching inexorably. He couldn't fully concentrate on work as he always had with precision. He often found himself gazing out the window with an inexplicable nostalgia for something he couldn't name. He had vivid dreams he didn't remember on waking, but that left a deep emotional trace throughout the following day. What Luca did not know at that crucial moment of his existence is that he was experiencing what Jung defined with scientific precision as preparatory unconscious synchronization, a complex psychological phenomenon in which the soul actively prepares to receive its perfect complementary counterpart. 2 weeks after our first in-depth counseling session, Luca met Sofia in a completely chance situation that defied every rational statistical probability. He was trapped in an elevator due to an unexpected technical fault, together with her, for 40 interminable minutes, in that confined, forced space, with no possibility of escape or distraction from the usual defenses of the ego. Something happened that Luca described with words I will never forget, as the instant feeling of the emptiness I didn't know I had until that precise moment. It was not simple, superficial physical attraction or the brain's hormonal chemistry that we know well. It was a deep recognition, inexplicable to the rational mind, as if an ancient part of him said with absolute certainty that transcended all doubt, "This is why I felt that particular emptiness. I was making room for her in my life." The preparatory emptiness that Luca had lived through for anguished weeks was not a symptom of pathological lack requiring medical intervention. It was the higher intelligence of the unconscious methodically creating the inner space needed to welcome a destined encounter without the useless resistance of the controlling ego. Jung discovered, through thousands of clinical cases, studied with obsessive attention, that the collective unconscious contains a precise and detailed map of all the significant encounters we are meant to live through over the course of our earthly existence. When we approach one of these crucial encounters in time, the ones that will change everything, the soul automatically begins the delicate process of inner preparation, creating that particular state of receptive emptiness that allows immediate recognition without mental interference. This perfectly explains why the great loves of life often arrive in the moments when we least actively seek them with deliberate effort. When we have finally stopped desperately striving and have created that empty space of deep acceptance of the present, the soul's preparatory emptiness manifests through specific and unmistakable signals that the body and the psyche constantly send, long before the rational mind can understand what is really happening at the deeper levels. A persistent and inexplicable sensation that something important is about to change radically in life, without being able to identify what specifically will change or when it will happen. Dreams more vivid than usual and emotionally charged, often featuring unknown people who leave a lasting impression that persists for entire days. An inexplicable restlessness, as if one were in constant expectation of something undefined, without knowing exactly what. Luca told me, with growing astonishment, that in the weeks before the fateful encounter with Sofia, he had spontaneously begun to change some long-established daily habits, for no apparent reason he could rationally explain. Had chosen completely different routes to get to work every morning. He had begun to frequent places he had never considered before in his routine, as if an invisible but powerful force were methodically guiding him toward something very specific. This is not irrational or random behavior that we can easily dismiss. It is the deep unconscious, silently orchestrating events to create the perfect conditions for the destined encounter according to a higher design. Jung called this mysterious phenomenon unconscious navigation and considered it one of the clearest proofs of the existence of a higher intelligence that guides our life far more than we believe possible. The preparatory emptiness is not always pleasant or romantic, as we might naively expect from the stories we are told in films. Sometimes it is deeply disturbing and distressing to the rational mind, precisely because the unconscious knows perfectly well that the approaching encounter will inexorably change absolutely everything forever in our orderly existence. Luca confessed to me with total sincerity and vulnerability that during those weeks of mysterious emptiness, he had also experienced moments of intense and inexplicable anxiety, as if a deep part of him instinctively knew that he was about to lose forever the secure life he knew and controlled. The rational, controlling ego, the conscious part of the personality we firmly believe ourselves to be, often perceives the preparatory emptiness as a serious existential threat because it correctly senses that it will entail a profound and irreversible transformation of one's established identity. But the infinite wisdom of the collective unconscious is infinitely superior to the limited fear of the ego that wants to maintain control. The emptiness that precedes destined encounters between complementary souls is not a cruel punishment or gratuitous suffering inflicted by destiny. It is a precious gift that the soul consciously gives itself in order to be fully present and available when what it has always awaited across the ages finally arrives. Jung observed repeatedly in his in-depth studies that people who stubbornly resist the preparatory emptiness, who desperately try to fill it with superficial distractions or inadequate substitute relationships, often miss the precious opportunity of the destined encounter when it presents itself before them. The emptiness must be honored with respect, accepted without resistance, lived fully as a sacred space of necessary preparation. Only in this way can the soul be completely receptive and open when its perfect counterpart arrives according to the cosmic design. When two people are truly destined to meet according to an invisible higher order, both simultaneously go through this delicate process of preparatory emptiness, even if they are physically separated by miles and know absolutely nothing about each other. It is as if their souls were already in deep communication through the universal collective unconscious, methodically synchronizing their inner states to be ready for the perfect moment of the physical encounter. Sophia, the extraordinary woman whom Luca met by chance in the elevator, changing everything forever, later told me with a moved voice that she too had lived through weeks of inexplicable emptiness before that fateful encounter. She had felt the very same sensation of waiting without a defined object, the same mysterious restlessness she couldn't rationally explain, the same vivid dreams with unknown people that left deep emotional traces. When they realized this incredible synchronicity that defied every probability, both simultaneously felt a kind of sacred and inexplicable reverence, as if they had become privileged witnesses to something profoundly mysterious that goes beyond ordinary, rational human understanding. The mutual and immediate recognition that took place in that stalled elevator was not just superficial attraction or compatibility of character that is discovered gradually. It was the simultaneous and perfect feeling of two emptinesses that had methodically prepared themselves for weeks to fit perfectly into one another, like the pieces of an infinitely complex cosmic puzzle, orchestrated by a higher intelligence. Jung explained with absolute clarity that this kind of deep preparatory emptiness absolutamente cannot be forced or simulated with any sophisticated psychological technique. Either it happens naturally as part of the unconscious process of preparation for the destined encounter, or it does not happen at all in life. There are no middle grounds or intermediate gradations in this specific phenomenon of the soul. And when it truly and authentically happens, without the manipulations of the ego, it always carries with it that particular quality of sacredness that makes you feel with absolute certainty that you are part of something far greater than your own limited individual existence. But be careful, because this point is absolutely critical to understand in order not to fall into dangerous illusions or self-deceptions of the ego. Not every emotional emptiness we feel is preparatory to a significant destined encounter. There exist pathological emptinesses linked to clinical depression, unresolved traumas of the past, emotional dependencies that require immediate professional therapeutic intervention and must not be romanticized. The fundamental difference lies in the energetic quality of the emptiness itself, which we can learn to recognize with practice. The authentic preparatory emptiness, although at times distressing and disturbing, always carries with it a subtle sensation of inexplicable positive expectation, as if something beautiful and important were about to happen in life. It is an emptiness pregnant with infinite possibilities not yet manifested, not a desperate emptiness of pathological lack that feeds on itself. The pathological emptiness, on the other hand, is characterized by deep despair, a sense of existential uselessness, total loss of interest in life and its beauties. It is an emptiness that constantly feeds on itself and becomes ever deeper and more destructive as time passes without intervention. Jung warned repeatedly that it is fundamental to learn to distinguish these two radically different types of emptiness in order not to confuse authentic spiritual preparation with serious psychological suffering that requires immediate professional help. Luca, being an extremely rational and control-oriented person, initially tried desperately to fill his preparatory emptiness with continuous frantic activities, extra work, until late, forced and inauthentic social outings. But the more he stubbornly tried to avoid or suppress it, the more the emptiness became persistent and present in his daily consciousness. It was only when he finally accepted living it fully and consciously without trying to change or eliminate it through willpower, that it magically transformed into a sacred space of conscious and receptive waiting. This deep acceptance of the emptiness as a necessary and sacred part of the process is perhaps the most important lesson we can learn from Jungian psychology applied to relationships destined to last. The preparatory emptiness also teaches us something fundamental about the nature of authentic love that transcends need. True, mature love is not born from the desperate need to fill a pathological lack that consumes us, but from the joyful recognition between two completenesses that freely choose to share their mutual fullness. When Luca met Sofia in apparently chance circumstances, he did not feel the desperate relief of someone who finally finds someone to fill their deep emotional holes. He felt the deep and inexplicable recognition of someone who meets their perfect natural counterpart, as if two perfectly tuned musical instruments spontaneously began to play in perfect harmony. The preparatory emptiness serves precisely this higher purpose, to empty us completely of all the unrealistic expectations, neurotic projections, and childish needs that could heavily interfere with the pure recognition of the complementary soul. It is the deep and necessary cleansing that the unconscious methodically carries out to allow authentic love to manifest without the obstacles of the ego or psychological resistances. Jung discovered, through decades of clinical observation, that relationships born after a significant period of preparatory emptiness have completely different qualities from those born of desperate need or anguished loneliness. They are relationships based on conscious and free choice rather than pathological dependence, on continuous mutual growth rather than the symbiotic fusion that suffocates. Luca and Sofia, after 3 years together of shared growth, told me that their relationship had never gone through the typical and destructive crisis of the ordinary couples we see everywhere. Not because it was perfect or free of concrete challenges, but because it was born of a recognition of the soul so deep that external difficulties could not in the slightest scratch the inner certainty of being destined for each other, according to a higher design. This is the transformative power of the preparatory emptiness when it is lived consciously and honored with respect as a sacred part of the process of meeting one's personal destiny. But the preparatory emptiness is by no means limited to romantic relationships, as we might superficially think. Jung observed the very same phenomenon before destined encounters of every possible kind. Deep friendships that radically change life, work opportunities that open unexpected new paths, spiritual teachers who arrive at the perfect moment when we are ready. Every time the soul consciously prepares to receive something truly significant for the journey, it creates that empty space of deep welcome that allows the new to manifest without the useless resistance of the controlling ego. The fundamental key to recognizing the authentic preparatory emptiness from the illusion is to learn patiently to listen to its specific and unmistakable energetic quality. It is not a dead or depressive emptiness that drains vital energy. It is a living emptiness pulsing with infinite potentialities not yet manifested. It is like the pregnant silence that precedes a marvelous symphony, full of music not yet played, but already present in creative potential. When you feel this particular kind of emptiness in your daily life, instead of desperately trying to fill it with superficial distractions or inadequate substitute relationships, try to welcome it as a precious message from the deep unconscious. Sit consciously with it, without judging it. Breathe into it with total presence. Let it teach you the sacred patience of conscious and trusting waiting. Because when you finally learn to recognize and honor the preparatory emptiness without resistance, you become an active collaborator of your destiny instead of a passive victim of random circumstances. You become a conscious co-creator of the destined encounters that will forever change your existence in ways you cannot even imagine. Jung warned that we live in a historical era that is afraid of emptiness in all its forms, that constantly tries to fill every space of silence with distracting noise, every moment of solitude with compulsive digital distraction. But it is precisely in these empty and silent spaces that the soul does its most important work of preparation for personal destiny. If this profound message has arrived directly to you at this precise moment of your life and not at another, perhaps it is not a chance coincidence, as we believe. Perhaps your unconscious is guiding you toward the understanding of something important that is about to happen in your personal existence. Stay with me a precious moment longer before returning to ordinary life. Put a like on the video if it has touched something deep in you. Subscribe to the channel if you want to continue this journey of discovery together with those who seek truth. They are small, simple gestures that make this precious space of authentic sharing grow and allow these messages to reach those who truly need them at this moment. Tell me sincerely, in the comments below, if you have ever lived through that particular emptiness that precedes the important encounters of life. Because when we share from authentic and vulnerable truth, we create a network of resonance that helps everyone recognize the signals of the soul that we often ignore. Never forget this when you close the video and return to your normal, ordinary daily life. The emptiness you sometimes feel deep down is not always a problem to be solved quickly with external solutions. Sometimes it is a precious gift the unconscious gives you to consciously prepare you to receive what you have always awaited, without rationally knowing it. Destiny is not a blind force that drags us passively wherever it wants against our free will. It is a conscious dance between the soul that actively prepares itself and the universe that responds synchronically, between the emptiness that welcomes with trust and the fullness that arrives at the perfect orchestrated moment. When you finally understand this at a deep level, every emptiness of your life becomes a sacred space of infinite possibilities, not yet manifested. Every weight becomes a conscious preparation for the daily miracle of the encounter with what is truly destined for you according to an invisible higher design.